The morning had the kind of deceptive serenity that precedes a tempest. A gentle breeze, scented with the honeysuckle blooming along the manicured hedges of Willow Creek estates, stirred the meticulously trimmed lawns. Birds chirped their cheerful melodies, oblivious to the impending chaos. In the heart of this seemingly idyllic community, a battle was about to erupt, a clash between the rigid order of a homeowners association and the unyielding will of a woman who was not only a resident but also the governor of the state. Sarah Mallory, the younger sister of Governor Eleanor Vance, had lived in Willow Creek Estates for 5 years. A victim of a rare neurological disorder that had progressively robbed her of her mobility, Sarah relied on a motorized wheelchair to navigate her world. Her home, a modest but charming bungalow, had been carefully adapted to accommodate her needs, including a sturdy, custom-built ramp leading to her front door. The ramp, constructed of treated lumber and designed to blend seamlessly with the house's exterior, had been Sarah's lifeline. It allowed her to maintain her independence, to come and go as she pleased, to feel a sense of normalcy in a life that had been irrevocably altered. The Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, however, had a different perspective. They were a bastion of conformity, a group of self-appointed guardians of aesthetic uniformity. Their bylaws, meticulously crafted and rigidly enforced, dictated everything from the color of mailbox flags to the height of hedges. The ramp, in their eyes, was an eyesore, a blight on the pristine landscape of their community. It violated the association's architectural guidelines, which, in their infinite wisdom, deemed all modifications to property exteriors subject to their approval. Sarah, in her quiet, unassuming way, had submitted an application for the ramp's construction, but it had been summarily denied. The reason? The ramp, according to the association, detracted from the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. Sarah, weary of bureaucratic battles and focused on managing her condition, had simply proceeded with the construction, believing that the necessity of her situation would outweigh the association's petty concerns. She was wrong. The association, emboldened by their perceived authority, had issued a series of increasingly stern notices, demanding the ramp's removal. Sarah, equally determined, had ignored them. She had lived her life with grace and resilience, refusing to be defined by her disability. She was not about to be bullied by a group of pedantic homeowners. The confrontation reached its crescendo on that fateful morning. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when a convoy of trucks, bearing the logo of a local demolition company, rolled into Willow Creek Estates. Leading the charge was Harold Finch, the president of the HOA, a man whose face was perpetually etched with a mixture of self-importance and thinly veiled disdain. Harold, a retired accountant with a penchant for rules and regulations, had made it his personal mission to rid Willow Creek Estates of any perceived deviation from the norm. He saw Sarah's ramp as a personal affront, a challenge to his authority. He stood beside the bulldozer, a clipboard clutched in his hand, his eyes scanning the street like a hawk searching for prey. He barked orders to the demolition crew, his voice sharp and authoritative. "That's it right there," he pointed toward Sarah's house, the eyesore. "Take it down. Make sure there's nothing left." The bulldozer roared to life, its engine a guttural growl that shattered the morning's tranquility. The crew, hardened by years of demolition work, moved with practiced efficiency. They were just doing their job, following orders. They had no idea of the storm they were about to unleash. Sarah, alerted by the noise, had wheeled herself to the front window. She watched in disbelief as the bulldozer approached her ramp, its steel blade glinting in the morning sun. A wave of anger, hot and fierce, washed over her. She had endured years of challenges, of physical limitations, of well-meaning but ultimately condescending pity. She had never allowed herself to be defeated, to be diminished. Now, these petty tyrants, these self-righteous busybodies, were attempting to strip her of her independence, to confine her to her home like a prisoner. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling with a mixture of rage and determination. She dialed her sister's number, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "Eleanor," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "they're destroying my ramp." Governor Eleanor Vance was in the middle of a high-level briefing when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, her brow furrowing. Sarah rarely called during working hours. She excused herself from the meeting, her expression serious. She stepped into the hallway, her heels clicking on the polished marble floor. "Sarah, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Sarah's voice, though strained, was filled with a steely resolve. She recounted the events unfolding at her home, her voice rising with each word. Eleanor listened, her expression hardening. She knew her sister's resilience, her quiet strength. She also knew the lengths to which Sarah would go to avoid bothering her. The fact that she was calling meant the situation was dire. "I'm on my way," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "Don't worry, Sarah. I'll handle this." She ended the call and turned to her chief of staff, a seasoned political veteran named Robert Maxwell. "Cancel my appointments," she said, her voice clipped. "I need to go to Willow Creek Estates. Now." Robert, accustomed to Eleanor's decisive nature, didn't ask questions. He knew that when Eleanor spoke with that tone, it was best to obey. Eleanor, a woman of formidable intellect and unwavering resolve, had risen through the ranks of state politics with a combination of sharp wit, strategic brilliance, and an unwavering commitment to justice. She was a force to be reckoned with, a leader who commanded respect and inspired loyalty. She was also fiercely protective of her family, particularly her sister. Sarah's disability had forged a bond between them, a bond that transcended the usual sibling rivalry. Eleanor had always admired Sarah's courage, her ability to face adversity with grace and dignity. Now that courage was being tested, and Eleanor was determined to ensure that her sister was not alone. She climbed into her state-issued SUV, her security detail following close behind. The driver sped through the city streets, sirens blaring, weaving through traffic with practiced ease. As they approached Willow Creek Estates, Eleanor's anger grew. She could see the plume of dust rising from Sarah's property, a grim testament to the destruction underway. The SUV screeched to a halt in front of Sarah's house. The scene that greeted Eleanor was one of utter chaos. The bulldozer, its steel blades still dripping with splinters of wood, stood like a monstrous sentinel. The demolition crew, their faces grim, were surveying the damage. Harold Finch, his face flushed with triumph, stood nearby, directing the cleanup. Sarah, her wheelchair positioned near the wreckage, watched the scene with a mixture of anger and despair. Eleanor stepped out of the SUV, her expression thunderous. She walked towards Harold Finch, her heels clicking on the pavement like the beat of a war drum. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. Harold, startled by the sudden appearance of the governor, stammered a response. "Governor Vance," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "we're just enforcing the association's bylaws. The ramp was in violation of our architectural guidelines." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You destroyed my sister's ramp," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Harold, emboldened by the presence of his fellow association members, who had gathered to witness the confrontation, attempted to regain his composure. "We followed the proper procedures," he said, his voice regaining its self-assured tone. "We sent notices, we gave her ample opportunity to comply." Eleanor's lips curled into a scornful smile. "Ample opportunity?" she repeated. "You gave my sister, a disabled woman, ample opportunity to remove the only means of access to her home?" The crowd of onlookers, initially supportive of Harold, began to shift uncomfortably. They had not anticipated the governor's arrival, nor her fierce defense of her sister. Eleanor turned to the demolition crew. "Stop," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "Cease all operations immediately." The crew, recognizing the authority in her voice, obeyed without hesitation. Eleanor turned back to Harold, her eyes blazing. "You will rebuild that ramp," she said, her voice cold and hard. "You will rebuild it exactly as it was, and you will do it immediately." Harold, realizing the gravity of the situation, began to stammer excuses. "Governor, I don't have the authority." Eleanor cut him off. "You have the authority to destroy," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You will find the authority to rebuild." She turned to her security detail. "Get me the state attorney general," she ordered. "I want a cease and desist order issued against the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I want every member of this association investigated for potential violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I want a full audit of their financial records." The crowd of onlookers gasped. They had never seen such a display of power, such a raw expression of